Some breaking news this morning from Hong Kong, including Chief Executive Carrie Lam invoking emergency powers and banning face masks. Janis Mackey Frayer joins us. She has more on what's happening there right now. And Janis, we've seen the crowds.
Becky, this law goes into effect at midnight tonight. Some people are exempt, like police, journalists, also people who have religious or medical reasons to wear a mask. But the protests over this started even before the law was confirmed. The idea has been floated here for weeks by pro-Beijing legislators. People say that it's draconian and that it could be the first step on a very slippery slope towards harsher measures like restricting the internet or even a curfew. Now, this is the first time in decades that the city's chief executive has invoked emergency powers. However, Carrie Lam is stressing that this is not a state of emergency, that this is what she says is a necessary move in order to shore up the city's reputation by getting the violence under control. Violators will face a year in prison as well as fines. And there are laws like this that are in effect in both the U.S. and in Canada. But highly controversial here, of course, because we're heading into our 18th straight weekend of protest, and also because of the timing of it, coming just after Carrie Lam has returned from National Day celebrations in Beijing. So for protesters, they see this as another sign that she's taking her marching orders from China. Becky?
Janis, probably also more concerning in an era where artificial intelligence allows cameras to be put up anywhere and identify people all over the place. It's much more invasive because of that new technology.
That's been a concern through the protests over the past several weeks, and why in the earlier days some of the more hardcore protesters were focusing on tearing down some of these smart cameras. This concern that police were using the protests as an opportunity to gain this critical mass of people so that they could use some of this facial recognition technology to then just turn around and round them up for arrest. So there are a lot of concerns about what this could lead to, given that they have taken this first step down that road.
Janis, thank you very much. Janis Mackey Frayer. For more on Hong Kong and the implications for the trade war with China, let's bring in Leland Miller, Beige Book International CEO. Leland, what do you think of these latest moves?
Well, it's death by a thousand cuts. So that Beijing doesn't have to bring in tanks. There's not going to need to be a Tiananmen-like incident here. What's going to happen is they're going to create rules, and then they're going to add to those rules, and people are going to start disappearing. So over time, National Day has passed. The end game is near. I think that they are just going to keep making tougher rules, enforcing those rules, and then this is going to dissipate at some point, because that's the only way this can that this can end, other than bloodshed.
All right, using this as a backdrop for the trade talks, now what?
Well, I think that, obviously President Xi is under a lot of stress from various issues that are hitting him right now, but so is President Trump. If the two sides had their way, they would have a deal, a baby deal, going into 2019. All the talk right now, because of the rumors about forced delisting and stopping Chinese investment flows last week, has made a lot of people think that there's no longer interest in having a deal, or that the president's tightening down. That's not what's happening. Behind the scenes, they're trying to get to a deal, but this is not easy.
But whatever pressure is on President Xi, you talked about the pressure that's now on President Trump. I'm imagining that President Xi is just sitting there, doing this, saying to themselves, I'm not buying any soybeans. I'm not doing anything, because I'm going to wait out this, whatever's going on in Washington and whatever the outcome of that is going to be, right?
Well, I think that's the growing sentiment in Beijing.
What's the incentive for him to do anything?
The incentive to do a tough deal, meaning China would actually have to do some heavy lifting, is absolutely minimal. They would like to buy agriculture.
Yeah, but Leland, what about all the companies now we've seen, specifically Apple, that are taking their supply chain somewhere else? China likes to win. So China doesn't want to wait. They could wait out President Trump, but they can't wait out all these companies that are now looking at the supply chain saying, we've got to get around China for the next event.
Right. Well, some of this I think they assume is a fait accompli. And I think the second part of it is that they realize that nobody in the White House, other than a handful of people, and that only sometimes includes the president, wants the December tariffs on. Because of that, they think, look, this is going to harm the U.S. more. It's going to harm us at this point. They don't want these things on. Why are we giving in? So they'll give a little. They'll do agricultural purchases. If they can pull back tariffs that are already on, which is on the table right now, then they'll do more. But yeah, the leverage is shifted.
I think the dice has been rolled on corporations saying to themselves, should I be in China or not? long term.
Right,
I think it doesn't matter whether Trump is the president or anybody.
Companies are way too dependent on China for years now.
Correct.
And they fell asleep at the wheel.
And I'm saying that lesson,
and now they have to come up
I'm saying
with
that lesson's already been.
workarounds.
I think that lesson's already there for them. And if they're leaving,
we're never getting back to that number, though. So I don't think China will never be as strong as before these talks. Once this agreement takes place, to me, it's a sell event because China growth has to, but by its nature, they're giving up something with eventually a trade deal, correct?
Well, look, China growth is slowing. It's going to continue to slow. Right. I mean, we're on a trajectory no matter what that they're going to slow down. The question is whether they're going to head off the challenges, which is enormous debt and this desire to continue to just build bridges to nowhere, or they're going to deal with it right now. So you're going to have slower growth no matter what going forward. The question is whether they're able to do that in a smart way or whether they keep building, and they have a systemic event because they didn't do something fast enough.